did a historical Jesus really exist? According to evidence from both Christian sources and non-Christian sources, the answer is yes. The Christian Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, offer the most details about Jesus' life, although their accounts do vary. We also have evidence from the Jewish historian Josephus that a historical Jesus did in fact exist. The Gospels, Matthew and Luke, put the birth of Jesus under the reign of Herod the Great, who died in 4 BCE. There's ambiguity in the Gospels about the exact dating of Jesus' birth, but the last years of the reign of Herod the Great represent the most likely possibility. When most people think of the birth of Jesus, they probably picture the typical Christmas nativity scene. Mary and Joseph out in the stable because there was no room at the inn, surrounded by animals, with wise men following the Star of Bethlehem from afar, coming to bear gifts to the newborn Jesus. While this scene is based on the birth narrative found in Luke, it is only found in Luke and none of the other 3 Gospels. Only Matthew also provides a shorter birth narrative. Mark and John skip Jesus' birth altogether and begin with his baptism by John the Baptist. What is shared by all 4 Gospels is that Jesus was the son of a woman called Mary. The birth narratives in the Gospel tell us that Mary was impregnated by the divine, and that the birth of Jesus was a virgin birth. She married a man named Joseph, but the Gospels are all emphatic that Joseph was not Jesus' biological father. Modern scholars such as Jane Schauberg posit that Mary may have been raped by a Roman soldier and gave birth to the illegitimate Jesus. We don't know all the details regarding Jesus' birth, but we do know that he was likely born in the area around Nazareth, if not in Nazareth itself. So let's take a look at that area. Since 322 BCE, with the conquering of Palestine by Alexander the Great, the area had always experienced Hellenistic influences. When Rome came into power, this impulse towards Hellenism became even more prominent. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, there were a series of Jewish resistance movements. The fundamentalist rebellion of the Maccabees brought a new ruling class into the power, which then allied itself with the remains of the old aristocracy, the Sadducees. They, however, were in opposition with the original alliance with the Pharisees. This old aristocracy left and eventually took form in the Essenes. This period of crisis eventually culminated in 3 wars between the Jews and the Romans in the early 1st century CE. It is at the beginning of this period that we can find the origin of the Jesus movement. Now let's look at the specific geographic regions where Jesus was active. Although Matthew and Luke record Jesus' birthplace as being in Bethlehem, all of the Gospels agree that Jesus grew up in Nazareth. In Mark, Jesus is referred to as the Nazarene many times, meaning that Nazareth was his ancestral city. It is likely in Nazareth where Jesus was educated, either by his mother Mary, as possibly indicated in the Qumran scrolls, or, more likely, by the elders in the local synagogue. Here, Jesus would learn Torah, which, as a 1st century Jew, would have heavily influenced his moral and cultural life. During this time, Nazareth was a small Jewish settlement in a small hill country in southern Galilee. It was remote from many trade routes, and there are little to no records of it during the time. The people of this rural community would have mostly been farmers. Despite its remote location, Nazareth was actually only about 6 kilometers from Sepphoris, a thriving and flourishing Jewish city with a strong Hellenistic stamp. It is possible that Jesus would have assisted in the construction of Sepphoris and been introduced to the Hellenistic traditions and customs. When Jesus began his public teachings, he moved to the north shore of the Sea of Galilee in a town called Capernaum. According to Mark, it was here that he called his first disciples and found welcome in Peter's house, which may have been the base for his activity. Jesus concentrated his teachings in this area and surrounding areas of Galilee, although, according to John, he may have gone on trips to Jerusalem more than once. It was in these wanderings that Jesus would have encountered the many conflicts in Galilee, including tensions between Judaism and Hellenism, Gentiles and Jews, the city areas and the rural areas, the class divisions between rich and poor, and the rulers and those who were ruled. All of this serves as the backdrop for the beginnings of the Jesus movement. Although there were many types of Judaism in Jesus' time, they all share basic convictions which can be called common Judaism. These include monotheism in the belief of the one God of Israel who holds a special covenant with the people of Israel. This covenant is laid out in the ethical and cultic commandments that are found in the Torah. These ethical commandments were of the most importance and dictated the morality of the people, putting it under the authority of God. The temple in Jerusalem was of special significance in the time of Jesus, because it was believed that God was only allowed to be worshipped in that one place. Aside from the temple in Jerusalem, nearly every Jewish community had synagogues where a lay religion was developed. These were not ruled by the priestly caste, as they were in Jerusalem, but were private institutions at the disposal of the community. These provided the platform for Jesus' teachings. The Jesus movement begins with Jesus' baptism by John the Baptist. John the Baptist was an itinerant prophet and teacher living out in the wilderness. His teachings reveal his belief in imminent judgment and a dire need for conversion and baptism in order to obtain the forgiveness of sins. The John the Baptist movement was a very popular one, with some of its followers eventually joining on to the Jesus movement after the death of John. The baptism of Jesus is one of the events in Jesus' life that is almost universally agreed upon by historians and scholars as having actually happened. Because it is represented in all four of the Gospels, it meets the criterion of multiple attestation. It also meets the criterion of embarrassment because never before in Jewish history has there been a Messiah who has been baptized. The baptism demonstrates that Jesus had a close relationship with John the Baptist, possibly one of student and teacher. This also shows that Jesus supported John the Baptist's teachings. This is also evident through the striking similarities between the two in Jesus' later public activities. There are, however, several key differences between the teachings of Jesus and John the Baptist. While Jesus does continue John's preaching of judgment, he seems to put a heavier emphasis on salvation than John did. Jesus did not have the ascetic lifestyle that John did, living in the wilderness and apparently eating only locusts and wild honey. And though Jesus himself is baptized, he never actually performs any baptisms. Jesus seems to have elaborated on and expanded on John the Baptist's teaching to form his own unique movement. All of the Gospels include stories of Jesus' healings and miracles. Jesus has a reputation as being able to perform miraculous healings. The historicity of what actually constituted these miracles and healings is not nearly as important as the reputation that it painted Jesus in. Jesus goes in and amongst the marginalized to heal them. Each of the Gospels reports separate cases of Jesus healing the blind, and in the Synoptic Gospels we find Jesus cleansing lepers, healing paralytics, curing hemorrhaging women, and even the servant of a Roman centurion. The Synoptic Gospels also contain accounts of Jesus exorcising demons out of people. These are not found in the Gospel of John, however. These exorcisms involve Jesus doing verbal battle with supernatural powers. Let's take a look at a reenactment of one of these exorcisms, coming from Matthew chapter 8.